Are we live? Are we live? Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me? Someone let me know in the comments that everything is working. I've got my microphone up here, just above, just out of shot here. So if someone could let me know if that's working or if I'm just talking to myself, that would be brilliant. I have got a little blippy thing saying that it's working, so I'm guessing it kind of is. So I am Ree from mummyof4.com. Welcome to my channel and the second in my YouTube live series that I'm doing this summer. So last week, if you missed last week, we just did a very general Q&A, and this is the difference when you get me live. You get all my mess ups and when I talk rubbish and things. So this week we are talking about autism, purely because I got so many questions last week about autism that I thought it deserved its own kind of topic. People saying in the comments that it's working. Good to know. Apologies if you're watching on catch up and you're having to deal with me juggling the tech. So hopefully I've got your comments up here. I've got a whole load of questions that you guys sent in over on Instagram that have been emailed to me through my email club. So if you're not in my email club, then make sure that you do head over to my blog and join that. And obviously questions that you have left on the comments on my YouTube community. And if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments and I will try and get to those soon. So we're going to go to the first one. I've got some over here. So first signs of autism I noticed in my children. So I'm just going to very briefly kind of skim over this. I have got a really in-depth video series where I went through all of our journey up to the point where I was about to go through Bella's diagnosis. And I've got another video explaining all about the diagnosis process and another video explaining exactly, it's very like raw vlog when I just found out the diagnosis and my kind of reaction to all that. But in summary, I am Ree. I have got 4 children. Now, the first of my children to receive a diagnosis was William, who is currently 9. Now, when he was little, he had what later sort of was referred to as spiky development. And I think it's a bit of a misconception perhaps that all children with autism are this or all children with autism are that. And obviously it's a spectrum and everyone's different. But in William's case, he had very spiky development, meaning in some ways he was incredibly advanced. So by the time he started school and did Rising Threes, which was Rising Threes in the UK, or where we live anyway, they start school the term after, or some cases the day after their 3rd birthday. By the time he started Rising Threes, he could read fluently, like fluently. And this is not typical behavior. However, he was not conversing. So he was reading in sentences, but he wasn't chatting in sentences. And he was communicating well enough, I felt, with me, as in I could understand him and I could anticipate his needs. But with other people, he really wasn't communicating. He was doing something called hand over hand, which a lot of these things, I think it's really difficult as a parent to notice that your children are doing them, because when you get asked a load of these questions, when you're in assessments and things, it's like, oh, does your child do this? And does your child do that? And you really have to think about it because you just know them. I'm not sure if this is making any sense, but you're so used to them and you're so used to just anticipating their needs and what they do. You don't analyze and break down what they do until you've been through this whole process, and then you break down what everybody does. Anyway, he was doing something called hand over hand, which is like, rather than this is my camera cap. So if this was a toy he wanted fixing, he would get my hand and try and use my hand as a tool to fix it. Rather than asking me, he'd just be like, you do this. And that's called hand over hand. So that is a sign that may be a red flag, if you like. I want to just pause very briefly to say that I am not qualified in any way other than being quite experienced through being a mum of children with autism, but I'm not a medical professional or anything. So obviously, like, see your own GP, see your own medical practitioner or whatever if you've got any concerns. But if any of these things that I'm saying, if you think, oh, actually, I never really thought about that before, but my child does that or whatever, we will get to later in this little live to kind of my advice to you if any of this stuff resonates with you. I'm going to pause one more time here to say that if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because I've got a really special guest on next week's live. I shall be announcing at the end of this live. Anyway, so William had this really spiky development. When he started rising threes, he used to do lots of things that were not typical. So he would only eat very rigid foods, very healthy foods, very rigid foods. He wouldn't like join in with children's birthday parties and things. He would just take off his shoes and just run in circles and laps and laps and laps. And he was a handful. I think that's fair to say. He was a wonderful, wonderful child, but he was a handful. And then, so I took him to start school. I'm not going to mention any names, obviously, but you know who you are if you're watching. His teacher in nursery was just amazing. So I took him, I hadn't met it before. I took him in to start. I said, look, I'm pretty sure he's somewhere on the spectrum. I was very flippant about it. Even though I don't think I believed it at that stage, I think it's something I kind of went, a flippant comment I made. So pretty sure he's somewhere on the spectrum. He can read, but you're not going to get him to join in with activities or keep his shoes on or anything. And then she said, well, we don't really do reading in nursery. It's like, no, he can do that, but you're not going to get him to join in. And I was just very matter of fact about it. I was quite worried about how well he's going to integrate into school. So then she came back to me after she'd been teaching him, I don't know, enough time she felt to get to know him, a few weeks, a month perhaps, and said, I think you were right. So I went through about 48 hours of sheer denial where I looked up all the other things it could have been. And I came to the conclusion through my research and phoning the health visitor and bullying into agreeing with me that actually he was just gifted. He didn't have autism. No, denial, not just a river in Egypt. He just, I wasn't willing to accept it. And I went through this denial. I went, it's okay. I've spoken to the health visitor. She totally agrees. It's not autism, it's this. And she went, no, you were right the first time. And then I kind of went, oh, and then I went on an absolute mission to get him a diagnosis. So I went on to the health visitor and I kind of went on this mission and we went through the whole process, and the whole process was a massive roller coaster, and I got his diagnosis. On to Bella, and then we'll skip back a little bit because we've got lots of other questions. On to Bella. Now with Bella, girls and boys present very, very differently. Again, I mean, everyone, it's a spectrum. So all children, all adults with autism present differently. But she was very different to William. So William had these very specific traits where he wouldn't wear shoes, and he wouldn't, I had to find the same pair of shoes over and over and over again, like bigger shoes, because he would not have different shoes. He literally had doodles, the little things, the little canvasy shoes all year round. That's all he'd wear, just a larger size of the same shoe. So she wasn't like that, and I always thought because she was so different, therefore it was very unlikely to be autism. But then there were things that were like red flags, like ritualistic behaviors and things because I'd really thrown myself into learning about autism. There's no way I would have ever suspected Bella if I hadn't had Will already, because she was very different. So very chatty most of the time, but she would do very ritualistic behaviors, especially at bedtime, where we had to say certain things to her and she had to say certain things back, and she'd really, really get very distressed if this routine was broken at all. She would totally lose it over things that most children would consider insignificant, like really get very, very upset and find it very, very difficult to recover from being upset at those things. I think a lot of children, if they say, for example, and this is just a made up example, but say, for example, a child was having a tantrum as opposed to a meltdown, and they were tantruming for chocolate or a toy or whatever it was. Generally, when a child is tantruming, if you then give them that thing, they'll calm down because they've got what they wanted. Often a child with autism will really struggle to come down from that meltdown and calm down from that meltdown. I think that's a big difference between a tantrum and a meltdown, in my opinion and my experience. So with Bella, I thought it's one of two things. Either I'm so immersed in autism that I'm seeing autism everywhere, or I'm so educated in autism that I'm picking things up that most people who are not immersed in autism would never notice. And I decided that the only way to figure that out is to get tested. Where we live, I don't know if it's the same all across the country. Let me know if you know what it's like where you are. But where we live, which is in Wales, and I don't know if it's different trust by trust actually, but where we live, under age 5, they are the problem of the health visitor, and the health visitor is responsible for them. And when they turn 5 on their 5th birthday, they're handed over to the education system. And in fact, this very lovely teacher who was amazing with William, and I was so lucky, he had her for Rising Threes and nursery and reception. So I was really, really lucky. She really looked after him and really got him ready for the rest of school. But basically she said, look, the education system is really difficult to get anywhere with, really difficult. So you need to get him vaccine before he's 5. So I had this in the back of my head with Bella, and I thought, well, look, where's the harm? We're lucky enough to have this at our disposal. And I thought, right, we'll get her on the list, and maybe by the time she gets seen, I'll be like, well, there was nothing there. That was all in my head. Or maybe it would be like, wowza, things did get more intense, and I'm quite glad that I got her checked. So anyway, got her checked. If you watch that video where I broke down what they did in the ADOS assessment, that's the name of the type of assessment that they do. I was like, well, I think this indicated this, and I'm assuming this indicated that. But even the people doing the assessment said, look, until we add at these points, this is not a clear-cut case. We're not going to know. So I hope that answers in a very long-winded way that. My next question was I worried about seeking a diagnosis? And a few people asked this in a few different ways. So was I worried about seeing the doctors, and was I worried about what people would think? It's a nerve-wracking process, and I'm not going to lie to you. It's quite mentally draining, emotionally draining, because it all feels like a little bit of a battle. Obviously, some people get more support with it, some people get less. I didn't realize how stressed I was going through Will's diagnosis process, but it was over like the Christmas period, I remember, and we had like a back-to-back day. And it was the same days as his nursery school concert. So it was something like he had an assessment in the morning and then a concert in the afternoon, and then the following day it was the other way around. So it was like a concert in the morning and assessment in the afternoon. I can't remember which way around it was, but it was something like that. And I can remember being in the concert and having to explain to people that like I wasn't crying, I wasn't especially ill, but I'd come out in like a rash all across my face here. It was like I'd been like I contoured my face, but with acid. So I had like a massive rash all across here, all across there, like I'd burnt my face. I think it was just, with hindsight, I think it was just a stress rash. So I didn't realize at the time how emotionally draining it was. But I think it is. I definitely think it was the right thing to do. And I'm going to touch on this again in a little bit, but I definitely think it was the right thing to do. But I'm not going to lie, it was an intense process. And only because you feel like there are a lot of hoops to jump through, and it's very long and drawn out. And you don't know how much waiting is going to be for things. And you worry, I guess I worried he would get a diagnosis, and I worried he wouldn't get a diagnosis. So I worried that he wouldn't fit their criteria, but yet would need a diagnosis, but they'd miss it somehow. I was convinced they'd miss it. I feel, having been through it, that they wouldn't ever diagnose a child that didn't have it, or not diagnose a child that did, because it's really so thorough. So I thought that, I guess I worried my children would slip through the net and then not be able to access help that I definitely knew that William needed. I think I felt a bit more confident that we were going to get the right answer, whatever that might have been, by the time I went through it with Bella. And I definitely felt, going through it with Bella, more comfortable because I knew what the process was going to be, which is kind of why I made those videos, because I made the videos I wish that I'd been able to watch before I'd been through it, and the videos I would have liked to have seen that would have kind of guided me through it. I'm also very aware, whenever I make any video really, that my children may watch them in the future. And I guess I wanted to document, if, as they're adults, how I was feeling at the time, and how it was a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, but it was absolutely the right thing to do and the best thing to do. And I adore my children. And let's face it, whether they come out with a diagnosis or they don't, they're the same child. It's just figuring out what's going on, how best to help them. Gosh, I'm being really wordy with all these. Let's dive into some of the comments before I Oh, guys, hello, everyone. Before I go back to my kind of pre-done, does Zara Dillon, in fact, you would ready for have autism or have been tested? In fact, I've had another question, so let's kind of touch on this now. Does autism run in the family? I think, I don't know if there are adults that are diagnosed with autism, but I know when I was in school, no one was as hot on picking it up. Like now, the teachers are really hot on it and they're looking for signs of it. I don't feel that, if anyone did get diagnosed when I was growing up, I didn't know anyone who did. Whereas I think it's quite commonplace now that people, that things are picked up and that it's normalized, really, that it's picked up. I think the better at noticing it. I think obviously medicine and mental health and things have improved and everyone is a lot better at getting the diagnosis that they need. So there are no other official diagnoses. There are no other people in the family officially diagnosed with autism in the wider family or our immediate family. However, do I believe that there is autism in our wider family? Yes. I'm not going to go into any more detail on that because obviously it's not my place to talk about those other people. But yes, I do believe it is elsewhere in the family. And Zara, that's another question actually. See, this is something else I cut out in my videos. I drink a lot because when I'm talking, my mouth is really dry. Okay. So people have asked, because I think I've mentioned it in a vlog, stories, somewhere, that Zara was on the pathway. This was very much for the same reason as Bella. And it's because sometimes I'm like, there's absolutely nothing there. And then other times I'm like, ooh, actually. So for example, meltdowns. She gets very upset over things having to be just so, especially when she's making something. And it's hard to know what is just typical 4-year-old behavior, as in neurotypical, which is I think I've done a video about this actually. The sort of the correct way of mentioning it would be people that do not have autism would be referred to as neurotypical, and people that do have autism would obviously be referred to as having autism. So it's hard to know and to differentiate what is an autism meltdown, what is a neurotypical 4-year-old tantrum, what is learned behavior. And I could go around in circles trying to figure this out all the time. But if I leave it till beyond her 5th birthday and then things escalate and get worse, because I would say that while William showed greater signs and more difficulties when he was younger and has improved with all of the strategies and things that have been put in place, I would say that Bella's difficulties have perhaps grown more intense in some areas. And this, I think, is quite a typical pattern. By all accounts, autism in girls is very, very, very difficult to pick up, is mostly overlooked because, so if you take William and Bella as an example, because again, another question is, what are the differences with William and Bella? But William was quite, obvious is perhaps not the right word, but when he was little, he would have been, if you asked which of these two children had autism out of the two, and they were the same age in this hypothetical situation, you would have said William, because he was running around more, he wasn't really making eye contact and things. Whereas now, with all the things that have been put in place, and I'll go into a little bit about the support the schools put in place because they've been amazing, but you probably wouldn't know when you meet William now. I doubt you'd know when you met Bella, but her difficulties with perfectionism and things, and her meltdowns about things like that have got worse, have got more difficult. And by all accounts, a lot of girls especially don't really, girls hide it very well. Not hide it's probably the wrong word. Mask it, cope with it better. Girls tend to, from what I've read and what I have conversed with people about, people sending me things in messages and things, and generally what I've learned, tend to mask it, cope with it better, hide it. Seems like it's been deceitful. It's not, isn't it? But just conceal their difficulties and cope better up until a point, and then they sort of hit the teenage years when obviously you've got the whole being a teenager is difficult, being a teenage girl is really difficult, with mean girls and all sorts. And then that sort of manifest itself as kind of depression. And that's the last thing I wanted. So I don't want that for Zara either. So back to what I was saying, I was talking about Zara, wasn't I? Gosh, see, my lives, they're just all over the place. So with Zara, I don't want to think, oh, I overlooked it. She didn't get the same diagnosis or the opportunity to see if she needed a diagnosis when she needed it. And then she wasn't able to access the help, and then ended up older and struggling with feeling depressed and feeling like she should have had some help that I wasn't able to access for her. So much the same as her sister, I've put her name through. It's going to be really slow because of COVID, but I have been told that even if she's not tested by the time she is 5, because Bella was actually over 5 when she was tested. William was just shy of 4. Was it just shy of 4? Yeah, William was just shy of 4, like 4 weeks shy of his 4th birthday when he was tested. Bella was probably a few weeks after her 5th birthday, but because she was in the system, the paperwork had started before her 5th birthday. She was already under the consultant. It counted. So even if Zara doesn't get tested before she's 5, I'm in no rush if she's not tested till she's 6 or whatever, because she's coping okay now. I just need to know that she's going to be tested in a timely fashion, within the next couple of years, rather than putting it through the education system, which could take many, many, many years. I know people that have waited 5 years, for this kind of thing. So yeah, long story short, I'm getting Zara tested. So another question. Let's have a just quick look through here. Hi. You look like, oh, thank you. Maybe it's just the light. Thank you very much. Hello. Do you think vaccines are related to autism? I've heard a few of these actually. Short answer, no. Did I worry about it when Dylan was little? I think there was a whole Andrew Wakefield fallout. I thought about it and I panicked and I was like, oh, do I do this? Do I give him the MMR or not? And then ultimately I looked into it. I realized that the whole MMR thing, that I read into it and it had all been totally disproven and just put the fear of goodness knows what into everybody. And then, of course, there was a measles outbreak, wasn't there? Around the time William was little. So luckily Dylan had his MMR, but it was terrifying. Because measles was everywhere, and obviously William was unvaccinated, so he actually did have the MMR early. In fact, he had 2 doses close together. Do I think this is any way related to autism? No, I don't actually believe that that's anything to do with it. I do think that a lot of the signs of autism often start to present themselves around the same time that children tend to get vaccinated, but I think it's unrelated. And the science would agree with me there. But yeah, I've had quite a few questions about that. And no, I don't actually think it's related. And I think it's far more important to protect my children. This is my personal belief, especially against things as nasty as measles. There were some horror stories going around back when that kind of was a bit of an outbreak. And the outbreak was because not enough people were being vaccinated. Give me a little... Let me know you can hear me properly in the comments. My little blippy thing on my screen showing my audio levels. It's like quite low. So as long as you can hear me okay, then I won't fiddle with it too much. Because let's face it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But just want to make sure you can actually all hear what I'm saying. Fine. Right, I've got a few more over here. Is Zara showing signs? Right, okay. What would you say to someone who is on the fence about seeking a diagnosis? Oh, I get this question so much, guys. Like so much. I get this is my situation, this is my child. Sometimes I think this, sometimes I don't. What do you think? And my answer is always the same. If you have enough concerns to be asking that question, then you should look into seeking to see if they need a diagnosis, because there is no harm in it. So yes, it might be a lot of paperwork and things, and maybe it'll go nowhere, but at least you'll know. At least it won't be always in the back of your mind, should I have done it? I always feel like you're going to regret the things you don't do more than the things you do. So if you feel it's nagging at you enough to need to message me or to start Googling, if in your search history is, should I get my child tested? My advice would be you need to look into it, because as a parent, we're too close to it. We can't like read a few things and think, yeah, that is, or yeah, that isn't. Even if I was an actual expert in autism, I would still not be able to tell if my children had autism or not without putting them through the testing process. And I wouldn't attempt it because it's such a detailed process, and you have to go and watch that video if you want to kind of see what I mean, because quite frankly, I made that video partly because I knew I would forget it, or because it was so detailed. So I got out, I wrote down all the notes, and I kind of brain dumped my thoughts on it at the time. But all I wanted to get across is that they're not going to get it wrong because it's really, really detailed. They go at it from lots of different angles. They speak to lots of different people, and then they do lots of very specific little tests, which the children just think are like playing. So they're not invasive. None of my children were upset by the tests at all. They were more like playing little games, a series of little games, reading books and asking certain questions and seeing how they react to things. So what was the question? What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so if you feel that you wonder, should you get them tested? The answer is get their name down, because by the time it comes around, which will probably be ages. If you're here in the UK, I mean, if you're in a different country, I don't know how it works where you are. Let me know where you are in the world and how the system works with you. But here in the UK, we have the NHS, we have the education system. It doesn't actually cost us money. You can choose to pay if you want to, and go privately with certain diagnoses and things. But as far as I'm concerned, if you put your child's name down, maybe by the time it comes around, you'll think, well, that was unnecessary and we don't need it. Or maybe you go through the whole process and they're like, no, there's no autism here, and it's all been for nothing. But at least you know. And the other question, which kind of ties into this, is how do I feel about labeling children? And the truth is, it's not labeling them, because we're not tattooing anything on their heads. You don't have to tell anyone. Once you get the diagnosis, you don't have to do anything with it if you don't want to. But it'll help you understand your child better, and it will help them access the help they need when they need it. Because once you've got that diagnosis, accessing the help is a possibility. Labeling your child, getting a diagnosis or not getting a diagnosis, doesn't change who they are. It doesn't change who they are as a person. All it does, it helps you to understand how they're wired a little bit better so that you can be the best possible parent for them and access the specific help that they may or may not need when they need it. So for example, another question actually is how much help to get in school. So we'll touch on that now. Bella doesn't have a lot of additional help in school, because even though she was diagnosed with a higher level of autism than Will, he, at the time where this was last looked at and assessed, and all this is changing in Wales, so next year it will be different, I'm sure, but he at the time needed more additional help and she was coping better in school. What she tended to do is bottle it all up in school and come home and go, bleh, which I think is quite typical behaviour for girls. But I believe that with the type of autism she has and the level of autism she has, she will need additional help the older she gets. And now that I've got that diagnosis, I can access that help for her if she needs it. If she's coping great, I don't need to. If she's not coping great in school, then I'm able to access that help for her. So I don't think labeling children is a problem. It's not, it's not a dirty word, autism. It's just how your brain's wired. So I've explained, again, I think I've done another question on here, how to explain to the children, just that everyone has different difficulties. So some people are better at writing, some are better at maths, some are better at sports, some are better at, making new friends. And so, William, you find maths easy, and Bella, you find reading easy, but some people don't find those things easy. And sometimes you would find certain things difficult and might find easy. And all that autism means is sometimes you find certain situations difficult and you might end up having a meltdown. And it's certain situations that other children that don't have autism wouldn't struggle with, but we're all different and we all struggle with different things. And that's sort of the most general way I've managed to describe it to them. And they kind of understand that on a level that they kind of are at the need at the moment. Right, okay, so a few of these. My 15-year-old son does hand over hand. Interesting. Does your 15-year-old son have a diagnosis, or is it just something you're kind of noticing now? Can autistic kids have a lot of energy? From the second my 3-year-old boy wakes up in the morning, he's bouncing, doesn't sit still until bedtime. Stimming, this is something else that has been brought up actually. Stimming is repetitive behaviours. And one of the things Zara does is literally bounce off the furniture. I don't think I've really captured it in videos, but we call her Sonic because she literally goes doing off one side, like Sonic the Hedgehog does in that game, like dung, 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 dung. So yeah, she does have a lot of energy. And I wonder if that is related to it. So I can't speak for all children with autism, but yeah, I would say that would be a trait I would perhaps associate with my children. The other thing I would say is that my children's brains, they get tired out mentally quite quickly. It's like they're noticing every detail. Is it called the RAS, which is your system which filters what you'll notice in the world. So if you're driving down the motorway, then you're on the lookout for dangers or whatever, and you don't notice all the little tiny details of the leaves and the trees and things, because it would just overload you, wouldn't it? And sometimes that's why you can get somewhere and think, well, I barely remember any of that drive. I feel like, I don't know if this is a real thing or just my observation, so let me know, chime in if this is something you've noticed. I feel like my children take in so much more. Like they will notice like the light switches and this and just the tiny details everywhere. And I sometimes feel like when we go new places, they're exhausted by the amount of detail they're absorbing. So this is why some of the strategies, so this is probably something that needs to be broken down into lots of different videos, doesn't it, in a more structured, organized way? Because each one of these little questions that we're going into could be like a whole video topic to chat about. But some of the strategies are, as well as routine, which you hear me talk about over and over and over and over, which just helps all children, I think, but children with autism especially, preparing my children for changes and things. Because one of the questions I know I've had is, how have they coped with switching from school to a summer routine? The biggest thing that my children need is like preparation of knowing what's coming. I think this is for a few reasons. So they like to know what's coming so that they can feel comfortable and they know what the routine is going to be, because they love routine. But also, I think it helps because, so say we know, like this summer, we are going on the Disney Magic of the Sea cruise, which we're really excited about. So we've got, like, I'm not going to go on about that here because we've got a whole separate Disney channel. So that's Mummy of Four Does Disney, if you're interested in Disney stuff. But basically, I've shown them a lot of stuff about the cruise. I wouldn't feel comfortable like springing it on them and being like, surprise, we're going today. My children, not only I feel like it's good to like build up the excitement, but I've shown them, like lots of videos about the cruise. William's looked at the deck plan and things. And the more that they kind of mentally prepare for things and see pictures of things and like where they're going to be and what it's going to look like, the better prepared they are and the better they cope with transitions. There's something called social stories, which are like pictures and words that go through situations to help children with autism prepare for things. So we're going back to school, we'd read books about going back to school. If we're going on holiday somewhere, I would show them pictures of where we're going or show them videos of where we're going. I prepare them by knowing what the routine change is going to be. I'm needing to get them to stay up later. So this is needed to be a big routine change. I talked in my summer routine video about the fact that normally I try and keep as normal a routine through the summer as possible. And I find that really, really helps. So sleeping at the same time, waking at the same time, eating at the same time. But I've realised when we go on this cruise, one of the nights, a show that we're going to see, which is a Disney Dream show, which is amazing. It's like a West End quality show. But it starts at 9:15. My children are normally in bed by 7. So what I've done is, rather than just go, oh, well, we'll wing it on the day, we've been nudging their bedtimes a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further forward each night, like 10, 15 minutes a night. And I've been nudging the time they get up in the morning. They've got little clocks in their room. They can get up when the sun comes up. So I've been nudging that rather than just going bam straight into late nights, which I know they wouldn't cope with. Because we've been nudging this forward, they're coping really well. They're now staying up later and sleeping later, and it's working really well. So I hope some of that answers some of that. Okay, special guest. Yes, special guest. I will let you guys, remind me not to get off this live before I've told you about my special guest for next week. Are you happy leaving the kids in mainstream school, or are you considering a specialist provision? My son's about to start a special school and I'm worried I've made the wrong decision. I think this is not specific to autism parents. Let me know in the comments if you feel the same, but I think with all parenting, we all second guess ourselves all the time. And I think it's just part of like evolution and trying to keep our children safe and trying to do our best for our children. I always worry, have I done the right thing? Always. I do feel comfortable where my children are in school. So having said I always worry about things, I think we've been involved in our children's school for so long now. And I'm just so over the moon happy with the care that they have received there. That I don't know if they'd be... I'm perfectly happy with my children in mainstream school because of the school they are in. But I guess it would depend on how much support you were receiving from the school, how good the school is with communicating with you. I would say that a really important thing to do for any child that has additional needs is to really keep the communication channels open. Like, we know all of the staff at the school really, really well. Speak to them as much as possible, get as much feedback, and then, you know, they're more likely to come to you if there's an issue, and you can kind of firefight problems as they're arising rather than waiting until parents even to find out what's going on. Is it harder to potty train an autistic child? My children were indeed challenging, especially William, to potty train. And Bella, maybe I was doing Instagram when I was potty training Bella, but not YouTube videos. Bella, I tried a few times. I tried when I was pregnant to potty train her. She was far too young, really, but she seemed quite grown up. And it was just a no-go. And then I tried again, and then I eventually tried again. And then she cheated the system. She had to fill up her star chart. And she had I don't know, 7 stars a day to get to fill her chart. And she was doing literally 25 weeks a day, just tiny little teaspoon weeks. So she was beating the system. William was incredibly challenging. And if I'm honest, he didn't have a diagnosis then. There were some people in my life that are no longer in our lives that I felt were really pressurizing me to potty train him because, it wasn't about time now. And I knew in my gut he wasn't ready for it. So I pushed ahead with it, which is, I think, that's why it was such a challenging process. I have had a few questions while I get to this about how other people in our lives reacted to it. Before I had the diagnosis with William, there were some people in our lives that are no longer in our lives that basically used to say in not so many words that I had made him as he was, and that the problems that we were having were my fault. And that he was challenging for those reasons. So suffice to say, it's easier not to have those sort of people in your lives. But anyway, right, my son didn't get diagnosed because he can have a conversation and eye contact with people. I've been told he has it because he doesn't meet the criteria for those 2 things. He didn't get diagnosed. Oh, it's exhausting, isn't it? It can be really, really exhausting. And it's very frustrating when it's they tick this column, but not this column. And out of curiosity, Maria, that I'm reading this comment, did your son get as far as the actual diagnosis? Because I think a lot of people, the bit where they kind of fall short, if you like, is they never get as far as the ADOS, because you've got to be this criteria to get as far as the assessment. Before the assessment, there's all sorts of hoops to jump through. So you've got to speak to the health visitor. Quite frankly, if you're not happy with, I think you can insist that the health visitor refers you if you are really not happy. And I would insist. If your health visitor's going, no, I'm not referring, then you can just go, I'm going to insist on this. And I'm pretty sure that they have to. I have heard of something in England that a friend of mine, Katie, from what Katie said, you can look her up, was talking about on stories. And it's about a right to be informed or something that has been brought out in England, where adults can request testing. So I live in Wales, so I don't know a great deal about that, but that might be worth a little Google if you are in England and you are over 18. So basically, I think a lot of people never get as far as actually getting tested because those criteria, because I was struggling with Bella, I was worried because she wasn't showing any signs in school and she was showing signs at home. So I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and we got as far as obviously getting tested. And then, like I said, even the people who were doing the tests were like, I'm really not sure how this is going to come out till we add up the scores. And they did add up the scores, and it came out as high levels of autism because she had difficulties in every column, just a little bit. Okay, so do your autistic children have learning support or teachers helping them at school? They have a really lovely thing called Game Club that they go to in school, which is speech and language kind of additional help, which isn't what you think, because obviously my children can speak and they don't have any. What I used to think of as speech and language is like not being able to pronounce things or difficulties with reading and conversing and things like that. But it's more about the understanding of language and the use of language. And in Game Club, they do things like learning about sharing and turn taking and things. Quite frankly, it's stuff that all children could benefit from. And if it was introduced in the wider curriculum, I think all children would benefit from it. But they learn those kind of skills there that perhaps would never come as naturally to a child with autism as a neurotypical child. Although I've got to say, I think all children struggle with those things sometimes. Okay, do any of your children get one-to-one support? No. And in fact, I've been told that one-to-one isn't really a thing unless a child is teetering on needing to be in a special school. And then I think it's a funding issue, isn't it? So I'm going to just set this while I keep reading. And I think one of the things that I sort of struggled with, I guess, is I only knew of one child with autism before William was diagnosed, really, that I kind of knew of. And this particular child had no speech, would fling himself around and did need constant one-to-one, like constantly around the clock one-to-one. So I thought that's what autism was because I wasn't very educated in it. So when William had the 2-year check, or whatever, how many of the months they've changed it now, haven't they? Used to be the 2-year check. When the 2-year check, the teacher, the health visitor came to do William's 2-year check. He stood up and recited the alphabet and, did all the puzzles, like that, because William's like he is very, very intelligent. He's like a human calculator now. And then he was reading things and whatever. She's like, well, clearly no problems here. I barely need to take off my coat. With hindsight, he shouldn't have been able to do those things, especially when he wasn't really looking at her or chatting to her. So the fact, if children are kind of developing quickly and they don't have autism, they would, if they're reading, they would also be very chatty and also, rather than being like very good at this. And yet, like, so William had like a mental age, like a reading age of, I don't know, 6 or 7, but a conversation age of 1 or something like that. When he did, I have to pull out his reports and look at those actual numbers, but it was a massive difference. So mine's not safe, only has no perception of danger. It can be really difficult, can't it? Right, hang on. I've now skimmed. I've done this with my scrolly thing and I've lost all the comments. I need to block someone. Oh dear, who do I need to block? Okay. Oh dear. See, I need someone like monitoring my comments for me, don't I, while I'm chatting away. Right. I think I've blocked the spammer person. There you go. Sorry guys if that's a bit distracting. Okay, so any other things that I need to address from the thing? Right, do my children stim? Yeah, I always put it down to, I think this is another thing that I struggled with. I always put it down to not understanding boys. So some things that my boys especially would do, I grew up with sisters. So I thought, God, boys, don't understand boys. They do some funny things. Love you, darling, but don't understand you. Like not being able to leave things alone. Like I think that's William's biggest thing. He just can't leave things alone. He'd be like, just constantly, or like feeling on the edge of things. Zara, like I said, we call her Sonic. Bella doesn't really, she did used to do something before she was diagnosed called statuing. She said she didn't want to go to the dentist and she would do statuing. And if she was stressed out, she'd literally and you wouldn't talk to you. She'd be like, just absolutely statue. And she called it that. I don't know why people are, okay. Right, sorry, we're talking about, trying to read the comments, trying to remember what I'm talking about. Okay, my chat is delayed. My daughter's a massive amount of energy, she never ever stops moving. She's also been created ADHD, but also suggested maybe it's part of the sensory seeking of her autism. I've got to say, I don't know loads and loads about ADHD and how it differs from autism. It's probably something I need to educate myself in a little bit. Next one, do you use Now and Next boards? Yeah, Now, I don't every day, but they are brilliant. And there are lots of apps and things. So for those of you who don't know, it's literally like, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. And I use this in sort of my conversation and my terminology with the children a lot. I During lockdown, we had like visual timetables and things, which a lot of people were like, wow, she's a bit extra. But actually, my children needed it in order to kind of feel secure. They didn't do very well with just not knowing what's going on and kind of going with the flow. They do better when they're like, right, well, first this, then it's lunch. So even if we don't use the boards, and I think because my children are quite, good verbally, that I can discuss these things with them now, they're at this level. But I have used pictures and things a lot before, social stories and routine things. We've had all the stickers with the Velcro and the pictures and ordering pictures and things of what we're going to do for kind of routine boards and things. But certainly the ones that can read, I just write it down or we just discuss it with them. So, oh, thank you guys. You're all being so lovely in the comments. You're all so lovely. Right. Oh gosh, is someone being really, really foul? I'm really sorry. I've blocked the person that was just being apparently really rude, the one I thought that I think you were all talking about. Anyway, right, trying to catch up. Really struggling to get a diagnosis for my daughter. She's almost 15. I've been fighting since she was 18 months. Oh, that's exhausting. First of all, big virtual hug to you. That sounds exhausting. Didn't display in school. Now she has bad mental health. Any advice? I mean, just keep going with it. Are there any different angles you can take with it? My advice would be, if you're not getting anywhere with one particular avenue, are there any other avenues you can explore? I mean, I'm probably a bit naughty, probably not supposed to do it, but would track, like, can I say I did this? Track down the email address of the secretary of, I'll tell you what I did with Williams, actually. I harassed the secretary. I remember now. This poor woman. I found the phone number of the secretary of the consultant he was due to be referred to, and I phoned her every day. I was just like, hi, really sorry, it's me again. I wasn't being horrible. I wasn't like ranting or anything. I was just like, it's me again. I'm really concerned. Is there any chance? Any news today? And eventually this poor woman must have been like, can you just phone this woman and get her off my case because she's doing my head in? Because the consultant rang me back at like 6, 7 o'clock one night and had a big conversation with me and put my mind, she went through some things with me, including one question I asked her at the time. Actually, I said, look, he's so rigid with his food. Do I just do what people are suggesting to do, which is just say, look, here's your food, eat it or don't, or starve, whatever. And she said, with a neurotypical child, then eventually they would eat. But with a child with autism, they'd probably just starve. So do not do that. I think the question about food and improving with that is probably one for a whole other topic. Would you say that is probably deserves its whole other topic? So, okay. Do your kids hate showers and getting their hair washed? I must admit, they're not fussed on it. Not fussed at all. Lots, again, we do lots of little tricks for showering. I put music on while they're having having their hair washed, and we kind of try to make a bit of a party of it. They hold little flannels just across their eyes because they get really stressed about that. And we also know when we're going to do it. We're like, right, this is when we're going to do it. And then, so this is the first then. First, we're going to have a shower. Then we're going to sit down and watch this lovely thing we're going to watch, or have a lovely story or whatever. And we kind of work through it that way. So, right. I am going to have to sign off very soon. So let's see if we can find one more question. Because do you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to go and shower and wash my children's hair, because they had swimming earlier, so they're full of chlorine. So we're going to have the joys of hair washing tonight, which will be fun. So let's just see if we can find another. I've got lots on Instagram as well. So let's grab another one of these. Did you and your hubby ever disagree on the idea that either of your children had autism? Yeah, and I think we handled it differently. I think both of us just went through cycles of it, oh, there's nothing going on here. and even with myself, and even with Bella, and even with Zara now, some days I'm like, something definitely going on here, and other days it's like, this is all in my head, I'm just seeing autism everywhere. And I think he does the same, but we're just not necessarily on the same cycles. I think now it's with Zara, I think we're both quite like, well, she's got autism, we know what the process is. At least we just know how our brain works this way, that way, whatever. And I think whatever happens, we know it'll be okay. I was surprised, I think, how emotional I was after Bella's diagnosis. But I think I wasn't upset that she had the diagnosis. I think it was more an outpouring of emotion, having been like this leading up to it, just like, get moving, get it done, get it done. I think it was more like just and just having all the emotions at once, and just feeling relief, but also like sad that she was going to perhaps struggle with things, because I like in a way I was just hoping that they were like, no, if she didn't have autism, the only reason I would not want her to have autism is because then perhaps she wouldn't get upset about things, but she's always going to get upset about something. The truth of the matter is they're always going to struggle with something. It just so happens that that's what her struggle is going to be. So I was just, that when I filmed that video, I just felt emotional, but I think it was just because it had all been so bottled up, and so like I was just like a can of Coke that someone had shaken, and like it was like, so we did, and we reacted differently to it. He's all very, if you know my husband, if you've seen vlogs, or if you know us personally, he's like that. Whereas I'm a bit more like, so I'm a bit more energized, emotional. I'm a bit more, and he's a bit more, we're sort of like yin and yang. So yeah, that has been one of the major differences, I guess, is how we reacted to it. And when I cried after, I can't remember, was it William or Bella's diagnosis? Both of them, I think. I think the one I'm thinking about is William's. He was like, well, why are you sad? Why are you upset? You knew this was happening. It's like, and just having an emotional reaction because it's been tense leading up to this. And he didn't really understand that. Leave it up to you to guess why that might be. Is that a male-female difference or something else? We don't know. Okay, guys, I am going to see, Ree, have you got my question? Right, Millie, what did you say? Ree, as a 15-year-old with autism, how do I manage meltdowns? Okay. I would say that it would probably be a similar, what will I teach my children? So if you were one of my children, what would I say to you? I think it's going to be noticing when things are building up. And I think this is a similar strategy for dealing with also things that might trigger you to be depressed or feel anxious or anything like that. So it's trying to identify early on when you're starting to feel like you're kind of slipping, So that's what I try and look for with my children, and trying to head off something that would be a meltdown before it flips out into a full-on. Like, it's easier to fix something when it's just kind of picking away a bit rather than when it's like a flood. So I would say if you can look out for those telltale signs of when you're starting to feel a bit, and then put strategies into place. So strategies such as breathing. William says, like, he talks about breathing techniques they do in school, which are literally just, listening to audio tracks and things. You can have something that you can play on your phone that is like a little 5-minute meditation thing. You can do some sort of like changing into like a exercise or whatever, some sort of physical jumping around, literally, and that could be just putting a song on, dancing around for a few minutes and just changing what's going on. I think one thing that when my children are kind of coming home from school and melting down, I feel like switching it up really helps. So I'll be like, right, okay, look, I know we're all struggling now, so we're going to go and put pajamas on. So we're going to change out of the situation we're in right now. We're in these clothes and we're feeling like, ugh. We're going to change out of that, and we're going to change it into feeling more comfortable and comforted. You can use certain smells to kind of calm you down and ground you. And obviously, I suppose when you're 15, this is going to be difficult because you're kind of old enough to be places on your own. You may not have a parent with you to help you through that. But perhaps you could also talk to friends of yours so they can perhaps look out for when they feel like you're feeling like you're slipping into struggling a little bit, and maybe they can help you. And if they can understand, if you've got friends that can understand the strategies that you use, and they can help remind you when maybe you might need to implement them or help you to implement them, then that might really help too. And I'm sure there'll be loads of other ways that you can support your friends in things that they struggle with, just as they can support you. So, right, guys, I'm gonna have to love you and leave you. But I did promise I'd announce next week, didn't I? Look, if you've got more comments and things that you would like to see a full video on, rather than leaving them in the chat for me, when this video ends, pop them in the comments if there's something you'd like to see like a full video on. And then what I'll do is perhaps I could put together a whole series of these things, really, because quite a lot of these points that I think I've learned and the strategies and things, I really think are valuable for all children and just make good parenting sense. One of the things, so I'm not ending now, I'm actually going to talk about one more thing. One of the reasons that a few people said to me as I was going through the diagnosis process with Bella, that if I hadn't parented her as if she was a child with autism, so I was parenting William as if he was a child with autism because he's a child with autism. I learned all these strategies and thought, do you know what, this is just good sense, and parented all my children that way from there on in. But if I hadn't been doing that, then she would not have been coping as well as she was, and she would have been more evident. So if she'd been my first child, not my third, or she'd been my first child with autism, then she wouldn't have been coping. She wouldn't have been coping as well as she had been. So my point is, if I do some of these videos about some more in-depth strategies about the things we do, maybe they will help you if you've got a child on the spectrum or a child that you suspect may be on the spectrum. But quite frankly, I don't think they'll be unhelpful, even if you don't have any children on the spectrum and all your children are neurotypical, because quite a lot of it is just advice I've picked up that makes damn good sense. So next week, we have got Vicky from By Vicky Smith, or also known as on YouTube, The Mummy Bubble, coming on, and we're going to be talking about, totally different to this, all things kind of current affairs. Vicky is an ex-journalist, and she does an amazing job over on Instagram of like breaking down the news. So whatever's going on in the world, and let's face it, there is a lot going on in the world at the moment, guys. There's a lot going on in the world. She does a really good job of like just smashing through the BS to the truth of what we need to know from the news. And she kind of breaks down, okay, that's inflammatory, emotional. We can ignore that. This is sensible. This is what you need to know. And she's just so clever at just breaking through the nonsense and the media noise and telling us what we need to know. And she has been amazing. And she's been such a rock for so many people. She has been a better source of news than the actual news, because you know that she's not giving you all the fluff and the nonsense you don't need to see. And it's not inflammatory and stressful, because I don't know about you, but I have found, especially watching the news, having it streamed at me, quite stressful through this pandemic. And it has sent me into some ugly crying episodes because it's been really stressful to watch. So Vicky is going to be answering all of your questions. So I will put up pretty soon, over like hopefully the next 24 hours, I'll put like up the link to where we're going to be. Will be next Tuesday at 7 p.m. I tell you what I'll do. I'll put a community post up on my channel, so you can leave your questions on there. I'll put a sticker over on my Instagram story, so check out for that, and you can put all your questions in there, and I will put those questions to Vicky and she can answer them all about what's going on. So if you want to know about regulations, you want to know about the news about vaccines or traveling abroad, or just anything in the news that you want to go, what's the truth about this? What do you really think about this? Or the royals? She's really good about that as well. If you want to know, oh dear, we found another troll, haven't we? We'll just get rid of that. If you want to know any of that stuff about the news, about what's going on in the world, you can leave those comments there for Vicky, and she is amazing. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, do all the YouTube things. The like button, not the dislike button, but the thumbs up button. Subscribe and turn on bell notifications so you don't miss any uploads or live streams for that matter. Here on this channel, we're doing a live stream next week, and then we're away, so it'll just be a normal video on the Tuesday. And then on this channel, we're going to have the traveling to the cruise. So I'll do a little vlog of like leaving the house and just all the excitement of heading down to Southampton. And then the vlogs from there are going to flip over onto my Mummy of 4 Does Disney channel. So if you love geeking out on Disney, you can follow all of the magic aboard the Disney Magic at Sea, and you can follow us over there. So make sure you are subscribed to Mummy of 4 Does Disney as well, so you can follow all that excitement. So I'd love to have you over there as a subscriber if you're into Disney. If you're not, just hang over here. Like, I'm not going to harp on about it over here. That's why I set up a separate channel. I'm just going to have like a very normal like traveling vlog, like a normal vlog that I would do anyway on this channel. And then you can follow me over to the Disney one if that's your thing. So thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for being with me. A few questions and things. Sorry if I didn't get to any, but we can always do a part 2 of this if you really feel like there were questions in there, or if you have been through the comments, and because I'm trying to like talk to you guys and not lose my train of thought, but also read the comments. If there have been any, if anyone wants to just do a list of questions that they feel I missed and just email them to me or something, then I'd be happy to kind of either break those off into separate, more in-depth videos, or do a live again just to address those comments. So thanks, guys. Love you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I'm off to go and deal with showering my children.